The Unbreakable Boy is a new faith-based drama from the director of Jesus Revolution and Ordinary Angels. It's a movie that actually wrapped filming like way back in the year 2020. So I was personally curious if the delayed release kind of foreshadowed a movie that frankly just wasn't very good, or if the movie would be worth the wait. Well, I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So in like the last decade or so, the Irwin brothers, who are the founders of Kingdom Story Company and also the Wonder Project, and also director John Gunn, have become fairly like influential figures in the ever-expanding faith-based entertainment landscape. And I think it's probably because of that sort of growing public profile that The Unbreakable Boy, a film that wrapped filming 5 years ago, is now finally getting a theatrical release. And obviously, I can only speculate to like the reasons for its delayed release, but personally, I found the film itself to be a very mature and heartfelt story that I actually enjoyed a lot more than I expected to. The film struggles at times with, I think, an uncertain like narrative focus and tonal identity, but it is elevated, I think, by some very excellent acting performances and an uplifting story just about healing and finding joy and beauty in the middle of life's storms. The movie is based on a memoir that I think was published in the year 2014 and tells the story of like a young autistic boy named Austin who is diagnosed with osteogenesis imperfecta, which is also called brittle bone disease, and kind of how his parents struggle to raise him while keeping their own lives and relationship from falling apart. Just on the surface, it is the type of story that just feels like tailor-made for adaptation as a faith-based film, and I think in some ways it does take a somewhat conventional path in doing so. There is plenty of like tear-jerking drama and like condemnation of vices like alcoholism and like explicit church and faith influences that like viewers can check off sort of the cinematic bingo card. But that being said, there's also I think an authenticity to this film that does elevate it like above that base level. It's an inspirational story, but not necessarily like a feel-good one, at least not in like a superficial kind of like sugary sweet sense that I think maybe some other films in the genre can sometimes be. I mean, fear not, there is very much like a happy ending to this, but it's also a film that just seems willing to be brutally raw and honest just about like the hardships of life on the way to that satisfying destination. And I think consistent with sort of the overarching message just about the unpredictable ebbs and flows of life, there is a sort of like tug of war with the film's tone between sort of a very whimsical coming of age family story and then like a more serious adult drama. Because there are moments of very like, exuberant joy and playfulness, such as like whenever the story is told from the point of view of Austin, kind of transporting viewers into his very delightfully like vivid imagination with, cartoon dragons and people flying through the clouds like superheroes. But on the other hand, like when not seeing the world through Austin's eyes, The Unbreakable Boy is an almost like unrelentingly just heavy film in which characters rarely seem to ever have time to just like exhale before a new hardship is heaped upon them. The whimsical moments like when Austin himself is front and center, I do think will appeal to younger viewers, but I think the rest of the material just may be a little bit too emotionally heavy or like adult centric for this film to work as a very traditional like family film. There's nothing like inappropriate in it, but personally, I don't think my own two 10-year-old boys would enjoy this as much as I initially thought just from the marketing. While the script sometimes struggles to strike a balance with its tone and focus, I think it does what many similar films, I think including John Gunn's own Jesus Revolution, often fail to do, and that is just allow the drama to unfold in a very organic way. There are the occasional heavy-handed kind of messaging moments here, but I think overall to me, the dialogue is surprisingly crisp, and I think there is a commendable just willingness to leave dramatic moments like narrative tension unresolved. I appreciated that Gunn just demonstrated restraint to not fast track the growth and healing of the characters in ways that I think would have undercutted the authenticity of those moments. And as a result, I think kind of in both how this film explores marriage and also parenting, I found that this film does aptly reflect sort of the messiness of real life rather than just sort of trot out a bunch of feel-good kind of Hollywoodized cliches. Also working in this film's favor, I think there's some very powerful acting performances. Jacob Lavelle, I think, is great as Austin, doing well in what is obviously a very challenging role for a young actor. But to me, I think Zachary Levi and Megan Faye, who both play Austin's parents, do really much of the heavy lifting here. Due to movies like Shazam and Harold and the Purple Crown last year, I think Levi has sort of settled into kind of become typecasted as sort of the silly man-child role, but he does demonstrate here that he has much wider dramatic range in a much more serious role. And Faye, I think she is fantastic as well, given perhaps, I think, the best performance, and at least the most nuanced performance, and serving as very much like the emotional anchor of this story. I will say, though, that if there is one thing lacking in this film, to me, is that it just doesn't provide Austin with enough of a spotlight to fully kind of demonstrate the blessings that come along with like the curse of his conditions, because he opens this film as the narrator, kind of promising to tell his life story, but then the narrative very quickly kind of shifts focus towards the parents, and since they struggle for most of this film to really understand Austin, he is therefore portrayed, I think, mostly as like a burden to bear rather than like a blessing to enrich their lives, which is an understanding that they do ultimately come to grasp by the end of the film. And I may be totally off base with this, but I think while Austin represents kind of a rare hero for children with autism, or really any other unique medical condition, to see in a Hollywood film, kind of the heavy emphasis on the more sacrificial burdens and hardships of the parents may do more to discourage rather than to empower such viewers. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, really not a whole lot at all. For language, there are a couple of minor profanities, including words that start with the letter D and A, as well as several uses of God's name in various contexts. There's a character that repeats the word retarded several times and then is reprimanded for doing so. And then Austin kind of frequently uses the word flippin' to say things like, I flipping love that, or it's flipping awesome. For violence, really nothing. There's a scene where two children engage in a fist fight, and then later a child chokes another child around the neck briefly, but nothing beyond that. In sexuality, Austin as a child is born out of wedlock, and his parents are shown to live together for some time before they ultimately do get married. Kind of the only other content thing is that Austin's father, really all throughout the early portion of this film, does struggle with alcohol abuse, and you do see him kind of overindulging. As far as themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface of this, Austin's bones are obviously brittle and just prone to frequent breaks, but I think the unbreakable boy at its core just reminds viewers that, kind of as the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans 3:23, that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Because in one sense, Austin is perhaps the least broken of all the characters, because both of his parents are clearly damaged with deep internal wounds, either from painful, difficult upbringings, or just from feeling crushed by life's sort of unexpected hardships. And this theme, I think, is very effectively visualized through a metaphor of a teacup, because during a particularly low point in his life, Scott, who is Austin's father, is instructed by his mother to drop a teacup on the floor and break it, and then collecting up sort of the broken pieces. She says something along the lines of, is this cup you right now? This is all of us, we're all broken. And then later, Scott repairs the cup using kintsugi, which is a Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold to bring kind of the beauty of its brokenness out and perfection. I think the visual does effectively embody just this film's message that kind of we are all imperfect, fallen beings, we're all broken inside, but beauty can be found and forged through putting those pieces back together as part of our story. And some of that healing process is by taking personal responsibility and just committing to do better, as Scott himself does by attending AA meetings. I think the movie also just emphasizes the importance of relationships and just struggling together within the context of both a family and a church community. And although it's not explicitly explained, it's also clearly implied that Scott's transformation also has a very deep spiritual component as he comes to rely on God during life's storms rather than merely blame God for the circumstances as he does kind of at the beginning of this film. So in the end, I think despite a few rough edges, The Unbreakable Boy is a heartfelt story that I actually enjoyed quite a bit. I think obviously it explores some delicate subject matter, and so there will inevitably be some viewers who, find the way that it handles those topics unsatisfactory. But at least to me, I think this is a movie that seems to clearly have its heart in the right place. In fact, and perhaps this is because I fall kind of squarely in the target audience as a dad of children who are roughly the same age as Austin, and also have several young relatives who are also on the autism spectrum. But this may be one of the kind of recent faith-based films that I've enjoyed the most. It's a heavy film, and I can't really imagine like wanting to watch it again, but I do think it's a film worth seeing that reminds us that life is difficult and we're all broken people, but healing is possible and there is joy to be found, even in the most like simple and unlikely places, if we have eyes to see it. But hey, I would love to hear what you guys think, so don't be shy, jump in the comment section, let's have a conversation about it. Also, encourage you guys, become a Collider, subscribe to the channel, lots of other movie and TV reviews, got our podcast, got interviews, just other fun stuff, and we'd love to have you guys be a part of that. But most of all, thanks for watching, stay safe, and continue to collide with your world for Christ.